Here we go.
Here we go. Here we go. Here we are. We are back. It's another week of Stand Up Explained. I am Brandt Tobler.
I'm Andrew Slater.
And today we're going to do the very fun topic called dealing with rejection. What is it like? I'll tell you what it's like. We just recorded half an episode and Andrew's computer dealt us the rejection of saying, let's see how well you guys handle rejection. So we are off to a good start. But just real quick up front, we want to thank everybody for sharing. We see you guys tweeting about it, sharing on Facebook, telling your friends. Thank you for subscribing, rating, review. It only takes 5 seconds. Please do that for us. It really helps. And we're just going to keep doing them. I had a comedy buddy this week ask me, like, hey, are we out of our minds to do stand-up comedy podcasts in the middle of a pandemic when nobody can do stand-up? And I said, I don't know, but I just love doing it. Me and Andrew love talking comedy. So we're hopefully some of these tips will help you someday when we get to hit the stage again, and hopefully we're entertaining you. But this is definitely a labor of love, and I know we're loving doing it. And so that's a perfect segue into a transition into – that wasn't a good transition at all. Let's talk about rejection.
The first one was better. The first time you tried it was way better.
I was so much better the first episode.
You guys should have listened to that one.
I wish. But today we're going to talk about dealing with rejection, which comes at you in so many different ways in stand-up. So, Andrew, we'll let you lead us off with your rejection thoughts.
Yeah, well, I'm the expert. Rejection is interesting with stand-up because really it's like the whole – you can look at it like on a lot of levels, right? Like I think when most people hear rejection in stand-up, they think of, oh, you didn't make it on that show, or you were turned down by this club, or – you know, but it's actually goes even, which is a lot of it, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, most
Didn't
emails.
Get to a festival. That's the big one out here. People,
for sure.
A lot of tears are cried over these festival submissions out here.
And those festivals are created just to, it's like a club, like a nightclub or whatever. They need the rejection to justify the status, right? We had to turn down 100 people so that the 10 that got in feel special, right? That's the only way those things work. So that is a big part of stand-up for sure, and we can talk about that more. But I like to think of it more as like there's like a microcosm of that literally on stage. Like when you're doing stand-up, when you're trying new jokes, most of it gets rejected. Like you get a lot of rejection immediately from audiences the second you try something new. And whether it's with like sending emails or putting yourself out there that way, or festivals, or if it's like the new bit, the key with this, if you're going to get good at stand-up, you got to get good with becoming like totally dead inside when it comes to rejection. You really do. You just have to go, they didn't like that. You know what I mean? Like the same way, because I think like maybe you and I probably got good at that one that I'm talking about, where you're on stage and you try a new bit and like they didn't like it. And you go, all right, well, it's not going to ruin my night, right?
Yeah.
We're probably both better at that than the other part, where you take your best 7 minutes and you send it out to the Tonight Show booker and they don't even email you back or something. And you go, well, fuck that dude. You know what I mean? Like we take that way more personal, but you need to be good at both, I think is the key, because the people who are good at both and have no shame about sending the emails out over and over and over and over again, that's ultimately that you want that attitude in both places, I think. Yeah.
No, I agree. And I think it's a great point about the first rejection you'll deal with before you even deal with comedy club owners and industry and festival submissions and stuff like that, is just the natural rejection you'll get on stage from some of your jokes, which going into this, I was thinking much more about the stuff I just mentioned, but you're right. I dealt with years of rejection from audiences before I even thought about the other stuff. But I agree with you. It took a while to get kind of that thick skin of like, where the rejection didn't hurt. I don't know if it ever hurt. It was just like, it was just maybe, I don't know how I would describe it. It's that first time.
It hurts. I think it does hurt. I think it's scary. Why is stand-up scary to do? I mean, why, like people listen to this, either they're new or they've done stand-up for a long time, or they're just a fan of stand-up, whatever. But you're like, in your head, you're like, man, stand-up's scary, right? Well, why is it scary? Because you're afraid of being rejected by the audience, right? You're afraid of being told, they're like, that's not funny. And you lose the fear when you lose the fear of the rejection, right? When you can go, well, I know I'm funny. I know I'm pretty good at this now. I've had enough success to where I can try new stuff. And if that new stuff doesn't work, then it's okay. You know,
Yeah.
I can either recover the set or I don't, but I know I'll be back up here again sometime. It doesn't bother me that much. Right. And I think you get better at that faster, and it's good. That helps you. It helps you be less afraid to do stand-up. I know it helped me.
Well, yeah, I think that rejection definitely you do get better at, and it's an easier rejection to deal with because it's more of a personal rejection where you can go, okay, I didn't do enough here. I can.
Well, you can separate yourself, your ego from it, and you can go, well, that was just that joke.
Yeah. And then there could be other stuff, but I think where it separates is the other one is, which we've touched on a little bit, is the competitive part of competing with your peers is when the other rejections really start to hurt, which we've preached about it on here before, but it's not easy. You know, we'll tell you time and time again, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You're not racing against anybody. Everybody goes on their own path. I could tell you all that bullshit, but trust me, and I've done better at it over time realizing, but those rejections are what hurt the most, is when someone else gets something that you didn't get. So, but I like what you said about that, is I didn't realize how much rejection before I got into the other rejection that I'd already been through. And you do just develop a thicker skin, and you just get used to that, and you're more comfortable with that.
Right. And I think like the reason why it hurts more, like, because you can explain away bad sets, right? You can go after a while. At first, they all hurt equally, but after a while, you can go, oh, that crowd was sucked, or I shouldn't have tried all that, stuff about,
or I didn't prepare,
or whatever. Yeah, I didn't prepare.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have. I got too drunk, or whatever. You can explain away like bad sets after a while because you've built up a lot of confidence, right? But like, when you're rejected by your peers or by gatekeepers or whatever, or industry types, that hurts more because we put them up on a pedestal. We go, their opinion matters more than just a regular audience member's, right? A regular audience member's opinion doesn't matter as much as like the booker for, the
Tonight Show
Comedy Festival. Yeah, whatever. So it's like, I think that's why that hurts more. But and I have a horrible problem with this, and a lot of people do, but like, you got to just not put people up on those pedestals and realize they know about the same. It's just an average comedy. But really, like, most of them are just like, oh, that's funny to me, so I'll book that, Like, they're not like these genius level comedy Yodas that can pick out the absolute best comedians in the world.
Yeah. And this just made me think of another example that really bothered me with, and it's not necessarily stand-up, but a lot of stand-ups write scripts and stuff. But I have a close friend who grew up here in Wyoming, in Laramie, Wyoming, a small, small town. And her uncle or somebody worked at one of the big agencies, right? And then he gave her a summer job, and her job was just to look over these scripts, and then she would decide if she liked them or not. And that just blew my mind, that somebody worked their ass off their whole entire life. And my friend McCready, who let's say she just broke up with her friend Corey, and might have just seen one of the first characters was named Corey, and was like, you know what, screw this script. And she honestly told me, she goes, there's days when I'd come in, I just didn't want to do it. She was like, it was a job. It was just like a job for a 19-year-old. And I was like, do you realize you were just throwing away people's dreams? And she goes, I do now, but at the time I just didn't know it. Right. So that's always stuck with me about rejection, of like, you know what, sometimes you have something and you hear all these stories about people that, it took them 50 times for someone to do it. So that's something that's always stuck with me, that helped me deal with a little more of the industry rejection, is like, I always just think when I submit something, I go, well, maybe McCready looked at it and she just doesn't give a shit. Now, I also try to balance that and go, okay, but let me look over and see. It also could have got rejected for other reasons. But I think stories like that make me deal a lot better with the initial rejection in the industry. Because like you said, you keep these gatekeepers up so high. Sometimes these people, they don't know shit. They don't,
Right.
it is
Or
just
they don't care.
heartbreaking. It is
They don't care
heartbreaking
that much.
that
They're
they
not
just
thinking
don't.
about it as much as you are.
Yeah, it just breaks my heart to think people, they just don't care. Just the way we treat like the shittiest jobs we ever had. That's the way they treated. The way I handed out
Right.
pizza was the way they looked at scripts. So that's something. That's a story I always share that stuck with me. Is like, sometimes the rejection, it's just out of your control. Like that kind of stuff. It's just crazy.
Well, and like, yeah, so what I've tried to come up with, or the way I try to think about it now, because my wife is the same way. She takes it really hard, takes it harder than I do, the rejection, honestly. And she's writing scripts now. She's not doing stand up, but in both cases with festivals and stuff, she would always take that stuff even harder than I did. But what we came up with, and what I try to think about it now, is that you should be trying to get rejected. Like if you never get any no's, then you're not being ambitious enough, right? You're playing it way too safe. You're only applying for things or asking to do spots at shows that are going to say yes all the time. That means you're not aiming high enough. You should be told, every week you should have a goal. Like I need to get 10 no's this week, right? And if they keep saying yes, then keep upping the ante for what you want, because then that's a good problem to have. But like most of the time, it's not going to be a problem. Most of the time, you're not going to have a problem getting to 10 no's. You can get to 10 no's by Monday morning, But I actually think of it that way. It's like, okay, I got my no's this week.
I love that.
It's the same way with stand up, right? Because like if you kill every set, right? That's not the way to think about it, because you're doing the same jokes every time. It's like you're not being ambitious enough, right? You should be like, I need to be trying enough. If I'm killing every time I go out, I need to be trying enough new stuff to where something doesn't work.
Yeah.
If everything's working, you're not experimenting enough, because something at some point should fall flat.
Yeah. That's great. That is incredible. I'll take that with me. That's why I love doing this. Like, I love that. You're right. Because when you're not getting those, you're just staying in your comfort zone. And then, you're not, and then that's how you get goals. I remember, I know I talked about it on here before about, I really want to do This Is Not Happening with Ari. And he said, I got no's and I got no's. And I will say, sometimes you just get a no, but then with Ari, I got constructive notes about like, hey, your story's good enough. You're just not famous enough. So then I was like, okay, that's not my fault.
That's not that constructive.
No, but that's still that's kept me going. And if I would have just got a no from the producers of Comedy Central, that would have hurt. But Ari said, hey man, your story's great, but Tom Arnold will tell a shittier story, but he's Tom Arnold. And I was like, I totally get that, but it didn't make me quit. And then when I kept going and I got rejected again and again, but then through those times, with the producer, Eric Abram, then he gave me more notes. So then I just kept going till I finally wasn't rejected. And it made it so much better. It made it so much better when I finally got it. So that's another thing, is like the rejections were good. And that's why I love what you just said. You take those no's, but those no's in hindsight, I was disappointed not to get This Is Not Happening. But when I finally got it, it meant so much more to me because of those rejections.
Yeah. And I think like, it's like an AAU team or something. And if you're winning every game by 30 points, it's time to move up. It's time to go to the AAA or quadruple. Or I don't know how AAU works, but anyway, whatever. You go up you play better competition, right? And like, if you're getting if everything's going great and they're saying yes to everything you're doing, then what I'm trying to say is you should be taking those no's as a badge of honor. It's like you go, good. Okay. Now I know where I need to go. I know where I need to work on. And some places are just going to keep the door shut to you forever. There's nothing you can do about that. Like they just don't like you, or, we both have had that, either clubs or audience members. You can't make that one person laugh, whatever. They're going to be out there.
Can we do a quick story? Because I don't know the story. Yeah. We won't say who it is, but like the biggest manager at the time in all of Hollywood, wasn't he mad at you for something and just rejected you? But
yeah. I didn't even know. So I don't know.
We could say, it doesn't matter.
We don't have to say the name, but like he was a famous manager,
The most
And
famous.
yeah, the most probably. I don't know who would it be now, but
He's
anyway,
not anymore, but he was at the time.
he was a very powerful guy, and he worked with a buddy of mine. He was his manager, and I was up for this job, this Norm Macdonald sports show on Comedy Central. I was up for this job, writing job, and but he didn't get me the audition or anything. So I wrote my packet or whatever. I sent it in through my agent, but then I guess my friend told the manager about this, and he like independently on his own put in a good word, which was very nice of him. I don't know if it put me over the top or not, but I like to think it was just because they liked the packet, but whatever.
It wasn't all that Hollywood power behind
Right.
you. I agree with you.
But then I got the job, and I think I said thank you before I got the job. Like I said, oh, thank you, that's nice, because I saw the email that he sent, and I said thank you. Then I got the job, but then I hear like months after I got the job, I hear third party through my friend that he's all pissed off because I didn't thank him again or send him money or something. Like I owed him money or I didn't thank him enough or something. So I was like, he was very angry. So I was like, well, I don't know. What do you want me to do? He's not my manager. Why I'm not going to send him any money, So,
but that makes me laugh because we'd always, we'd go through these, and you should, you'll have friends in comedy and you'll have your closest friends. And me and Andrew spend a lot of time when we lived together and then on the road, and we would just talk, we help each other through our rejections. But that was one that always made me laugh. I'd be serious with him and he'd be like, I don't know why I didn't get this. And I'd be like, I don't know, man. Everything you did was great. And then I'd be like, oh yeah, I forgot you did piss off the most powerful manager in all of Hollywood. So
right. Well, it's funny because then on that job too, I was it was my first real like showbiz sort of job. And I remember the first show that taped, we were hanging, there were a lot of celebrities showed up because it's like Norm Macdonald, and so then all these people are milling around before the show and at the craft service tables and stuff. And I'm kind of standing there awkwardly and I'm looking around because like Bill Simmons is there and Jimmy Kimmel. And so I'm kind of looking over everybody's shoulder, doing that LA douchey thing where I'm talking to somebody, but I'm really looking over. And some guy, I'm wearing a Mariners hat, and some guy comes up to me and he's like, oh, are you from Seattle? I'm like, yeah. And I'm looking for Bill Simmons. And he keeps talking about Seattle. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, man. And I just kind of walk away. And then later I find out that's like the president of Comedy Central.
Sometimes you reject people. You don't.
Yeah. See, that's another reason. Be careful who you reject, because I'm sure that didn't help me too much.
And that's why we're doing this podcast right now, because we've rejected all the wrong or got rejected.
But he was like actively trying to get me to talk to him about Seattle.
That's so funny.
I like talking about Seattle, but I was being a douche,
which is so weird. But yeah, so like the rejection, I just love everything you said about that. I don't think I've thought about it enough about like the no's are good. And if you can, and they're hard. I mean, this is great advice, but if I got a no today, it would still, hurt, especially if it's something you really went for. But I think I'd like to take that with me and be like, the next time I get no's, which is inevitable, which like you said, hopefully I'll get more no's and then start working towards it. But
and have fun with it too. Like, again, it hurts to have someone watch your tape, watch your best, what you think is your best set. But like you said, if they have constructive notes about like, hey, the lighting's not great, it's hard to see your face. Like the jokes are funny, but you just take that to heart, because like they probably are picking tapes based on a lot of things beyond just your jokes. So like,
well, yeah, that's great. That's another great point.
I'll go get a better tape. But like, I try to now, like, if a comedy club just like cartoonishly is sometimes I'll just email them to see if I can get them to say no again. And it just makes me laugh.
Yeah.
There's this one club in, what's it called? Have you done that one? The one where Jill got like attacked on stage?
Oh, in Tucson, Laughs. Tucson.
Laughs, yeah. So that club just will never have me. I feel safe saying it on the podcast.
I have the very similar story.
So sometimes this dude, in his very like, he wanted me to feature first, and I didn't want to feature, so whatever. It's a long story, but I was like, just to entertain myself, I'll send him emails going, hey, I'd like to headline, and I ask for more money and all this, but he won't even have me in the first place. So like, yeah, sometimes make a game out of it, you know, and
Yeah.
it just builds you want to build that armor up and be able to like take rejection and not let it stop you from going for the next one. I
Yeah.
guess. You never
Well, I
want
think,
to not apply for something because the last person told you
yeah.
no.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I love what you said too. Like, there's definitely rejection sucks, but if it comes with notes, that's not a rejection. That is an invitation to get you towards your goal. And I think that's something that took me a while to learn. If you came back to me with notes on why I didn't get something, as much as that hurt, that was still another positive, because that meant, oh, they're trying to get me so they don't have to say no, instead of just a straight no right off, which was, which will happen. And then we dealt with this again. We'll go back to the gatekeepers in LA, and I'm sure it's that same way in wherever you guys live, but the gatekeepers change a lot too. So don't burn it.
Yeah.
So there's
You'll
so many
last
times
longer.
the hottest show in LA or the Booker at the Laugh Factory would change like every 6 months. So you can't let that rejection. Maybe that person didn't like what you're doing. Maybe they didn't give you no. It's just straight no. But then don't fucking let it ruin your taste of Laugh Factory forever, because in 6 months there'll be someone else there. And here's another thing that you can learn about rejection. If you're rejected from the first person, when someone new comes in, they want to bring in their people to show that so they'll be looking for new people. That's another thing we learned in LA. Right. The turnover, when someone else turned over, that was a great opportunity for you. What used to be a no could possibly be a yes, because those people want to be like, oh, I don't do what the other person did. This is what I like to do here. And I was like, and that's how we got a lot of opportunities. But that was one thing, a couple shows I just wrote off when I got to LA, because they just flat out said no. And it hurt my feelings. And I probably wasn't good enough to be on those shows. But then I just never went to those shows anymore for like 4 years, because I was a pouty little bitch. Then I was like, someone finally took me back to that show. And they're like, why don't you do this show? I was like, oh, because so-and-so doesn't like me. And they're like, so-and-so hasn't booked this show for 3.5 years. And I'm like, well, I'm a fucking idiot. Right. I let the rejection get to me. I let the rejection, instead of using it as a positive, like you said, I let it make me into pouty, which is the worst thing I could have done.
Well, and you're always trying to protect, it's ego, it's your psyche. You're trying to protect yourself. And with stand up, you're putting yourself out there so much. There's going to be part of you is like, hey man, protect yourself a little bit, but you really got to just lose that. And like I think we both said there's not much I would do different with everything with stand up. But one thing I would try to do different is to take the ego, or don't take it personal. Don't take any of this stuff too personally. Right.
Yeah.
Like you said, this is not happening. I already just told you, well, you're not famous enough. And that could hurt if you let it, but then you could also look at it objectively and go, yeah, that kind of makes sense that they would just take the more famous person. So it's my job to either make my story that much better, wait,
or get famous,
right?
I took the easy way out.
Yeah. So I think like you can't take the rejection personally.
Yeah.
You got to separate it from, it's not an attack on you as an artist. It doesn't mean you're not funny. There could be and if they do give constructive criticism to it, if you don't take it personally, you're going to be in a better position to implement those changes, as long as it's good advice. And
I mean, I'll tell you another quick one. I had the opportunity to audition for Barstool Sports, the big website, and it was like a reality show, and the opportunity of a lifetime. Probably would have changed my life if I would have got it. And I went and I did my best, and it's a long story, but I didn't win. And then the door was open. They left the door open when I left to still try to be there. And again, my ego got in the way, and I was just hurt that I didn't win. And I just came home and licked my wounds, instead of, I wish I would have just came home and said, you know what, I didn't win this now. But again, what we were just talking about, they left the door open. They didn't slam the door shut on the rejection. They're like, hey, this is not your time now. And instead, I went home, pouted, or not pouted. I just was disappointed that time. But now in hindsight, people reach out to me and go, hey, weren't you the guy that did Barstool? Whatever happened? And I just am honest. I'm like, they couldn't have been nicer to me. They rejected me in the nicest. I mean, the Portnoy, if you know anything about Barstool, a lot of people think he could be a dick. He couldn't have been nicer to me, and said on the way out, now we have we've met and you could still keep going. And instead I let that window close. Now, if I reach out to them, I don't think I could have. So that's another example of me letting the rejection.
But then
Just
see, no, I don't think that's true, right? Like if we've learned anything from this podcast, it's like if you did have an idea or something to pitch Barstool, I don't think you should go, well, I kind of missed my
well,
opportunity. I mean, because all they can do, right? What's the worst case scenario is that they say no again, right?
yeah.
Or they don't respond to the email, but who gives a shit,
No, you're right. And I think I still could do that. But what I'm saying, but you're exactly right about that. I still
Not
could.
that you're right. You're right
But
that you might be in a
I
better
wish I would have
position.
rode the momentum more of
Right.
that rejection I took as a end of the road rejection when it definitely wasn't. And now looking back on in hindsight, like God, I shouldn't have let that rejection again. So many times in this business, you'll get in your own way, and I'm guilty of it so many times. When I was like, damn, and I mean, like you said, I can still get those no's now. And you're right, I should. If I did have something, I probably still would reach out. But I just don't know if if that reach out was a lot easier. Was one person back then till 10. But you're right. If I did have something, I get those no's. I mean, that's
Right.
yeah.
And there's just the only when you really sit down and go, what am I risking by pursuing this opportunity? Like, let's say you have somebody's email and you have this idea, like, well, what am I risking by reaching out to them and pitching it or whatever? And if the only things you're risking is your own embarrassment, humiliation, or worried about, or you're worried about your ego being bruised, then that's not a good enough reason not to. Sometimes there are reasons not to reach.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can go, you know what, actually I would be horrible at that and I don't want to do it anyway, so I'm not going to audition for it. Or, hey, that I'm not ready for that, I don't have an hour, I don't want to put myself out there for that, whatever. Sometimes there's valid reasons. And but the key is being honest with yourself. And if the only reason why you're not going for something is because you're afraid of bruising your ego, that is going to get in your way forever. And the sooner you can lose that.
I mean, I think we've both been there plenty of times. I know I have, where I've
Yeah.
wrote it out and then I read it and I reread it and I read it and I was like, it's just hitting that button, just do it. And then then finally I just say, fuck it. And I do it. And I'll tell you what, I've never regretted doing it. I've got to that point, looking back on it. There was times when I was like, do I hit send? Do I hit send? And eventually I had to be like, let's just do it. And then I did it. And I'd say 90% of the time I didn't get any of that shit, but I've never regretted sending that email. It's like, just go, just get your rejections is right. And I just want to touch on another thing, because this one's the one for some reason here in Denver that everyone is so fragile about, is these festivals. They get so sad when they don't get in these festivals, which I think these festivals have really become more of like the cool kids thing. And I think that part of it hurts, but I just want to tell them, when I see these guys just have complete meltdowns on Facebook about it, I'm like, I promise you, you're going to go to a festival, you're going to do maybe 2 shows, and for maybe 20 people, it's not just for laughs. Like,
right.
That's the one.
Save your tears for I mean, you're going to get rejected from more festivals, from other shows, but yeah, you want to save your tears for the things that matter a little bit more than the festivals.
Yeah, I mean, if I want to tell them, hey man, you that hurts, but you just saved yourself a ton of money. It's not
right.
The festivals, I mean, there's so much fun, and we've talked about it on here. You want to do them, it's a great time to network, but man, I don't know what it is about the Denver water, but man, these kids out here, when they don't get in a festival, you would think they don't get to go to their family reunion or something. I'm like, no, there'll be a festival next year. Just don't worry about it. I think, again, that goes back. I guess I realize it goes back to what we started at the beginning. It's that competitive thing when they know somebody who got in the festival and then they didn't get it, and that makes it tougher.
And also there's very few, like, in stand-up, there can be a huge holding pattern in comedy where it's like you're an open micer, then you're doing showcases, then maybe you're working the road a little bit, hosting, maybe you're featuring, but that area where you're like showcase to featuring, that can be this giant pool of people. And you can feel like some people are in that little area for like 15 years. Some people are in there for 6 months, but
Mm-hmm.
it can feel like purgatory. And there's very few things to let you know you're advancing towards headliner, right? And one of the ways you can like feel like you're moving the ball forward is like, oh, I got into a festival this year. Like that is a clear, definitive thing. Like I'm moving towards headlining.
Yeah, that makes
But
sense.
the real way you move to headlining is like getting so good at comedy that people want to pay money to see you do an
Yeah.
hour, so it's like the
But
festival is like fun and it is a good way, it's great networking, all that stuff, and there's value to it, but it's
yeah,
debatable the trade-off for money and
no, I
time.
think you know what that made me feel a little more sympathy to it because I agree. I guess when you are at that middle point of your career, you're not really getting to Conan yet if you're not a headliner. I guess the festivals, I guess I do now see why it means so much to him because it is really
Well, it's the
one
same
of the
thing with
few things.
TV. I mean, like you think about TV sets, the real reason you really want to do it, if you're being 100% honest with yourself, it's like because you want to say that you did it.
Yeah.
You want the experience of doing it. You want to meet the host. You want to be on TV, to tell your friends. And it's not like that makes you famous overnight. It's not like you're going to do Jimmy Kimmel or whatever, and the next morning it's going to change your life. It's really not.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with a festival, I think, but it's just a smaller version of that, where it's like you just want to say you got into something.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
No, I'd see that. I guess I just didn't really have a respect for that. Is just that when you're like in a feature, that's like a kind of a stepping stone when there's not a lot of steps there till you get to headliner. Because then when you get to headliner, then you have TV sets and recording a CD, and there's a
Yeah.
lot bigger. Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, I
And
should
I
be a
also,
little nicer
yeah, be a
about
little nicer. Be a
it.
little
My
nicer to
bad.
those Denver
Sorry, you
comics.
guys didn't get into all those festivals.
but, but also,
I had so much
like,
fun at them, though. I'll tell you that.
well, no, your move is like you don't even apply to them, and then you just show up anyway and hang out at them.
Yeah, you
And then
could
you
do
get all
that
the
too.
value of it. I remember at Bridgetown, you were hanging out way more. I was in the damn festival, but you were more places at Bridgetown than I
Yeah,
was.
dude, just show up sometimes. Just crash the party. They don't know. There's 100 comics there. Yeah, and then I do, and I still use Bridgetown as a credit because I think I got on a show. I hung out with
Yeah,
everybody. I was
you were
just
there.
coming through Portland, and you were there, and I was like, well, I'm in this festival, I guess now. I saved my $50.
But, yeah, so I don't know. I think that the key to rejection, because it's like we said, it's everywhere in stand up. It's trying your new jokes, it's trying to get on the Tonight Show, and everything in between, right? And they're going to reject you 9 times out of 10 in both cases. But the key is not to let the last thing stop you from doing the next thing. And you just have to go, that's part of it. That's just part. No, not even no. We haven't even talked about this. Forget no. How about ignored? That most of the time it's not a no. It's just you don't even know if they ever read the email or watched the tape or whatever. That's really more of it than anything, which is even more infuriating than getting a solid no back.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that is something that, luckily we're at just where we get no's, which still sucks. But yeah, I forgot all about that 7 years of my career when no one, when the rejections were returned to sender, just
no reply, or like they don't even think they need, and I get it. Like a lot of times bookers or stuff, they get flooded with requests and all that, but
yeah. What advice do you have for that when you just get nothing?
Send it again. No,
Yeah.
honestly, I think I've gone to these panels before where industry panels, and I actually was curious. It's like, what would a booker say, like, if they just ignored an email, because is it honestly like they get so many, they just didn't see it, or are they trying to tell you something when they ignore it? But I think what I've heard is like, if you're sending your avails out to a club and you get nothing, they just don't reply. I think it's like, you wait a month and you send it again.
Yeah.
I think it's like you don't send it every day, you don't send it every week, maybe even. But
Yeah,
I think
you don't do that.
You're sending one a month, and then finally they can say no. They can just go, hey, we don't need this every month or whatever. That's fine. At least that's an interaction. But I don't think there's anything wrong with like sending someone an email once a month until they
Well, I know I talked about it on here on one of the episodes. I think dealing with bookers and stuff. But remember
Oh,
when
that's right. Yeah.
when I would get so mad that they wouldn't reply, especially the one the rejection that I talked about here on the that hurts the most is when they reach out to you and say, "Hey, we'd like you to do this," and then you write back and say, "Okay, I'd love to do this," and then they just don't talk to you. And that's the
Yeah.
times when I've maybe 2 or 3 times with these guys. I finally just wrote, "Hey, man, just tell me to go fuck myself or book me. Let's just not do this anymore."
Right.
I think they
You
still just
see,
don't
you're trying to
respond,
get
but
to know.
I
Try to get
just
an
try to,
answer.
yeah, just get to know so I don't waste my time still doing it. But that just goes back to what you said earlier. Just sometimes I learned to, I think it's a good sign we got to the point where we're having fun with our nose a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I was
No, that's
like,
an example of you like going of saying this rejection doesn't hurt that much. I just want to
yeah,
be done with this. So say yes or no. You know, you get to a point. It's like in the movies, like an action movie or something, and somebody's been like tortured for so long, or like they're like they don't know if they're gonna die, they're gonna live, and then at the end they're like, you know, man, just shoot me already, just kill me. You know,
yeah,
like I don't want to do this, and you're gonna kill me, you're not gonna kill me, just get it over with, and just shoot me in the head. And that's kind of what it's. That's what comedy's like. It's
well,
like just get it over with, shoot me in the head. That's where you want to be.
well, that kind of reminds me of like hanging out at shows, stuff we talked about how to get stage time. I think there's been times at shows when I reached out to people and then they rejected me. And instead of just, I still would just go to the shows and watch my friends. And then eventually they're like, oh man, this dude, I shouldn't have rejected him. He's still here supporting my show.
Right.
Even I said no to him. It's weird how people aren't good. I think most people are really nice and don't like saying no. Like, like eventually they're like, God, I wish I would
Yeah.
have said no to that in a weird way. I think if you keep going, as long as you, like you said, don't be persistent. Be persistent, calculated persistent. Send a follow up in a month. We've talked about it on here before. Don't send them something every single day because then they will just be like,
Right.
get out of here. I don't
And
want to deal with that.
also, here's my last piece of advice for this whole thing. But like, know who you are when you decide how often to follow up or how persistent to be. If you're the type of person who's like really type A and like super needy and like hustler, and your instinct is to just they didn't email me back and send another one back in an hour and another, and if you're the type of person who writes texts and then no one texts you back and you just start sending question marks,
I hate
you
you.
don't you you don't need us to motivate you. You're sending enough, right?
Yeah.
You're probably the type of person who's sending enough email. But if you're like my personality, where the instinct is like you send one, they don't respond, you're like, oh, I guess that person hates me and I shall never reach out again. That's my attitude, and I need to be coached and motivated to go, no, fight through that. So
Yeah.
like kind of know who you are. And if you're, because what I always tell my wife, because again, she deals with the same stuff. I'm like, we're never going to be the people who are the squeakiest wheel. We're just not. We're never going to get it to the point. So we should always err on the side of more aggressive, because that's what we're fighting, our personality type. There are people who should probably be pulling back a little bit, but you got to know who you are.
Yeah. And luckily, if you're too aggressive, someone will usually tell you that, but no one will ever tell you you're too passive. If you're too passive, they'll just you'll just wither away, and they'll be like, what happened to that guy? I wish he was more aggressive. So if you're probably being too passive, I know I'm with you. I'm too passive. And if by chance you are being too aggressive, someone will eventually, I think I told the story on here before, but one of our friends, he loved Brian Regan, and to show Brian Regan, he sent Brian Regan a letter every single day to prove how much he loved Brian Regan. Eventually Brian Regan's manager just wrote back and said, hey man, like, we get it. Like, don't fucking, and Brian Regan's the nicest guy in the world. He obviously didn't curse or anything, but he's like, okay, thank you. Brian says, thank you, but you can stop sending these. If you're probably not being aggressive enough until someone, you don't want to be told you're too aggressive, but I would say 95% of you listening, I'd probably 100, because if you're aggressive, you don't have time to listen to us. You're doing aggressive shit.
No, but that's the smartest thing I think you've ever said is people will tell you when you're being too aggressive. No one's ever told someone when they're being too passive, because they're not thinking about them.
Yeah.
They forgot about them. You're right. You look up one day and you go, oh yeah, that, they were super funny. What happened to them? Oh, I just, you weren't asking me to do your show, so I figured I wasn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm a genius. That's the best thing I ever
You're a
said.
genius.
So we
That's
should
the-
leave it on that because it's not
that's
going to get any better than that. So hopefully you guys learned a lot. I know I actually learned a lot from this episode that I'm going to take with me. And that, like I said at the beginning, this is why I love doing it. I think it's just such a good reminder. So take those no's. Don't let the rejection, just small bump in the road, and keep going.
Yeah.
Simple enough.
And don't reject our podcast. No.
Yeah, don't
Wasn't gonna
reject
do it.
the fact I keep asking you guys to rate, subscribe, and review, and a lot of you haven't done it. So quit rejecting the one thing we asked you guys to do. But we love you guys. Yeah, that's it. Subscribe, rate, review, tell your friends, post something about it if you enjoyed this or any of the episodes. We will keep them coming. We're going to go to one a week just because we got a lot of stuff going on. Andrew announced his wife is pregnant, which I think we can say on here, right? I don't know. Whenever you're listening to this episode.
No, we can say that's next episode. I talk about how to knock up
well, next episode is how to get laid as a comedian. But we got a lot of stuff going on trying to survive this pandemic. So we're just going to go to one a week, but we'll always take your questions. You can reach out to either of us. We're always here to help, or leave your questions in the comments. And so that's it for this week. Congratulations, Father.
Thanks.
We will. I'm Brandt Tobler.
I'm Andrew Slater.
We'll see you guys next week.